Imagine finding the love of your life, but when you stand at a wedding to say I do, you find out you could go to a high-security prison for 7 years. Not for murder, not for stealing, but for loving the wrong person. A person you're not allowed to love because of a 500-year-old law. The quiet towns of the United Kingdom hide many secrets, but very few are as shocking or cause as much anger as the case of Arthur Pendleton and Eleanor Vance. This is not just a story of a forbidden romance. It is the story of a broken family, a shocking betrayal, and a massive legal fight against the powerful British government. It asks one big question: who gets to decide who we are allowed to love? To understand how big this problem was, we must go back to the late 1980s. Arthur Pendleton was a normal man living a quiet life. He was married to Beatrice Vance. They shared a home, promises, and normal family connections. One of those connections was Eleanor Vance. She was Beatrice's mother and Arthur's mother-in-law. For years, everything was completely normal. Eleanor was the respected grandmother who visited often. Arthur was the good son-in-law. But Arthur and Beatrice's marriage was not strong. Like many marriages around the world, they started arguing more. They started talking less. Finally, the marriage fell apart. They got divorced in 1989. Arthur and Beatrice went their separate ways. The story should have ended right there, a simple ending to a failed marriage. But life can be very strange. After the divorce, Arthur felt lost and alone. Surprisingly, the person who helped him through this hard time was not a new friend. It was his former mother-in-law, Eleanor. At first, they just shared their sadness about the broken family. They drank tea, talked about what happened, and comforted each other. But slowly, during those quiet talks, their relationship started to change. They were no longer just a former mother-in-law and son-in-law. Their friendship turned into deep caring, and that caring turned into a strong, powerful, romantic love. Arthur, a man in his mid-30s, had fallen deeply in love with Eleanor, a woman in her late 50s. When people in their town started whispering about their romance, the reaction was fast and angry. People were disgusted. Neighbors gossiped, but the person hurt the most was Beatrice. She felt completely betrayed. The man who used to be her husband was now sleeping with her mother. The shock completely destroyed the family. Beatrice promised to never forgive them. She stopped talking to them and treated them like outcasts. Even with all the public anger and the ruined family, Arthur and Eleanor stayed together. Their love grew stronger. They survived the hate for 8 long years. By 1997, they decided they wanted to make it official. They wanted the world to see them as husband and wife, not just a shocking secret. Full of hope, Arthur walked into the local government office to apply for marriage papers. He filled out the forms, handed them to the worker, and waited. The worker looked at the paper, and her eyes grew wide with horror. The quiet, boring office suddenly felt like a panic room. The worker looked straight at Arthur and said something terrifying. "You cannot marry this woman. It is against the law." Arthur was given a very serious legal warning. Under British law, a man was completely forbidden from marrying his mother-in-law. This law was based on old religious rules from 500 years ago. During the time of King Henry VIII, the old law treated family by marriage exactly the same way as family by blood, to stop incest. If Arthur and Eleanor tried to get married, they would not get a marriage certificate, they would be sent to prison. The punishment for this forbidden wedding was up to 7 years in jail. They were trapped. The law said their love was a crime. For most people, the fear of going to prison for 7 years would be the end. They would give up. But Arthur Pendleton was different. He was furious. He believed the government was taking away his basic human rights. He decided to fight back. He changed from a quiet, normal man into a fierce fighter in the legal system. Arthur started his fight in his local town, but soon the national news heard about it. He appeared on television. He wore glasses and had a very serious face as he passionately explained his situation. He argued that the law was an old, useless rule from the Middle Ages. He said it had no place in the modern world. Because he and Eleanor shared no blood, he argued that the incest rule made no sense. He asked the British government to change it. He talked to politicians. He faced angry interviewers on TV who called him a bad person. The legal bills grew huge, and the stress was terrible, but Arthur refused to give up. However, the British government refused to change. They said the old law was necessary to protect traditional families. Since he could not win in his own country, Arthur took a massive risk. He went above the British courts. He took his fight to the highest human rights court in Europe, the European Court of Human Rights in Strasbourg. The legal battle took years. Courts across Europe argued about this very personal fight. Lawyers debated the meaning of human rights, family rules, and how much power a government should have. Arthur and Eleanor just waited. Their lives were put on hold in a painful waiting game. Then in 2005, a massive, earth-shaking decision was made. The European Court of Human Rights gave its final answer. They chose to support Arthur and Eleanor. The court said the British government's rule stopping a man from marrying his mother-in-law was a violation of human rights. Specifically, it broke the rule that gives people the right to marry and start a family. The court said the British law made no sense and interfered too much with personal freedom. It was a huge, embarrassing loss for the British government. The United Kingdom was forced to give up and change its laws. The 500-year-old rule was finally destroyed. 2 years later, in 2007, the big day finally arrived. After nearly 20 years of angry news stories, a broken family, and a stressful legal war, Arthur and Eleanor stood in front of an official. There were no police officers waiting to arrest them. There was only the quiet sound of a pen writing on paper. They were finally legally husband and wife. The story of the man who married his mother-in-law is one of the most interesting and shocking legal events in modern history. It shows how hard someone will fight to protect their private life from old, unfair laws. The people in this story, who we called Arthur Pendleton and Eleanor Vance, were actually named Clive Blunden and Brenda Steed. The daughter who was hurt by this romance was Irene. Clive and Brenda's long fight changed British marriage laws forever. They proved that sometimes love does not just survive, it rewrites the rules. This was Courtroom Tea, case closed.